Stubborn crickets. It's going to continue. I'm going to watch it all happen. You know, it doesn't stop with us. It keeps going. This nonsense that we're up against. It's an occupation. Keep explaining to you. All you got to do is read the most basic information, quality information on international law. An occupier is one to be thrown off. If you don't, you'll lose. You'll lose to that. I don't know why this is so hard to get and to understand, or it's understood, but you don't really think that there's anything you can do about it. And I'm not an evidence for that for myself. Yeah, it's a difficult thing at some level because there's only a few of us doing it. In fact, I was just sending a Twitter off to someone on my feed and said, you got to move all that energy that happened in San Francisco into the seats of decision. Yeah, it's nice to see a showing of the warrior spirit, if you will, but we have to move it into the places that are go after the actual criminals, not the ones that you're fighting that are actually at the beck and call of the criminals. And so we have I think we have a different thought to have, and it's certainly not going to be in inaction. We're told over and over again. I don't even know how this is even a thought that we can pretend to do anything. We have to step up and really do things. Before we can do anything, we have to have the proper intelligence, the proper knowledge, and the proper way at imparting that knowledge. And as I've said before, I may not be myself. I'm apparently not the guy that people actually want to listen to, but I certainly have a power to bring to people that do, and we do that all the time. I'm always giving the next. For those that are actually doing the research and follow up on their own impassion, finding a wrong they want to make right, and I get working with them, I can move them along on their own path, beyond what they even thought was available. And that's how we start working together. And it doesn't take a lot of us in these paths that people are now taking up to start to really make a big difference. It's just that there's so few that you really don't hear about them. They're actually fairly prevalent if you knew where to look, and they actually are having effect, but not in the way of direct. See, everyone wants the quick answer. Everyone wants I say the law, and that should be good enough. And when it's not good enough, you fold up tent and your roadshow goes away. And it's not like that at all. We are literally being overwhelmed by occupying forces, I should say. And I don't mean by the troop. I mean by the different styles of people that have figured out the things that the people forgot to remember. How people get taken down. How societies get transformed. And they tell us this. They tell us that they're transforming what's going on. And so the educated masses were required to keep what we were gave. Even so. And we weren't gave something so bad if we actually had understood who was giving it and what we were really supposed to, what part we were really supposed to keep. And then my focus here, and I've been focused by this land disposal law. It's the law of the land. For me, it's not just a phrase somewhere. And I've told you before, the law of the land, you have to be very careful when you go to Article 6 of that Constitution. It says it's subject to prior engagements and debt. And so, we have a problem, Houston, and everywhere else in the world. And that problem festers and becomes now what you see today. Pretty fascinating. And then the occupation started, because we didn't keep that republic, if I can say it in that regard. We didn't keep what was underpinning what was new in the world we called America at the time it was established, was not the fraud that was perpetrated on us, but what the underlying principles were. We failed to keep those. And so behind the woodshed we learn principles, don't we? We should. We ought to. As I said earlier on Twitter today, the most underrated place on earth is behind the woodshed. So I ask you get the word out. People really, I don't know, people don't want to hear it, but that's not for me. Listen, I can only tell the truth, and I can only tell where to go find more of it. I can tell the truth as I understand it, and I can do steps and tell you steps that'll help perfect that truth for you, to make those wrongs that at least I've seen that you might engage, make them right. All I can do is keep talking to you about it. I can't make you do it. For those of you on podcasts, I'll get it, and pastcast, and even recast. over there on UCY.tv. This will be a BTW-RLM 210. So for those of you that are looking for the content page for this and recast or a broadcast or pastcast, you type in BTW-RLM 210 and type in either Behind the Woodshed or Real Liberty Media, and you should get the content page from the things that I refer to, and then speak about in the context not of reporting the so-called news that we think it is, which we've all found out it's really set up in fraud. It's fraudulent. It's to get you to go somewhere, and then as I look at it, it's a notice. All this so-called fake news is not fake notice. It's telling you something. You just have to have the power of discernment to figure out what that is. And I try to bring those principles of how to do that behind the woodshed. I'm not the only one, but I'm probably so far as I can tell, probably the most accurate and the most comprehensive. In other words, as I just heard, let's see, James Corbett talking about Rockefeller making the medical profession. If you listen very carefully to how they did it, you see what I talk about was done by that guy in lots of ways, in particular was the medical field. I would hope that James Corbett will look at that analysis of the method that's done and look around him, and he'll see they're doing the very same thing everywhere. The distinction that I would have to add for people to add is that when they attach those licensing problems onto people, in other words, making this Western-defined medical licensing, they made it a crime to make it licensable. When they apply that to a producer, you destroy your country, and that's what they've done. And you're watching the country be destroyed. You're watching the underlying wealth and the ability to make wealth being destroyed, and that's part of the plan. And so I find myself again in the mining law, land disposal law, the law of the land, in a very particular witness. That because it becomes the foundation of your society, also becomes the place that everyone's trying to attack and is attacking, and they are prevailing, and they're prevailing on a massive ignorance. What you can be told by Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson said, we better keep the masses educated. And they lost they failed, they derelict in their own obligation and duty to do so. It's not on us, it's not on me to make you. This was an obligation on every one of you. If you wanted a better life, it was to seek it and then impose it, if I can say it that way. Now, what we get is we get a lot of people, that are out there that are imposing it, but they're imposing it without the law of the land applied. They can care less because they want their agenda. And one of the main agendas that are out there right now is, we can call it sustainable development. We found out in the Bar Association's documentation, House resolution document, out of their own words, the most powerful confession and condemnation I can imagine, get someone to confess their sin, so to speak. They tell us, if you had any doubt, sustainable development was the term that they used in the United States, and they didn't tell the United States the truth, and they denied that it existed. This thing that was actually what they called in Europe the very same thing called Agenda 21, which is a plan of the 21st century against you all in the future we want, which is not the one you and I, were ever involved in. It's the one they are the one that are imposing, and they have the plan, they're the occupier, and they're going to do whatever their plan had inside it that they won't tell you. We can only surmise it from how it works. And we can see like the Agenda 2030 is the next iteration of the plan, the fulfillment of the plan. The bottom line is, as I tell you, go in those UN documents, go about 2/3 to 3/4 in, you'll see the caveat to their authority. You'll see how everything comes subject to what they really want. It's about 3/4 of the way in. It's not like they haven't told us in the whole document, but you see it's like the Declaration of Human Rights. You see the caveat about 3/4 way in, that your human rights, your animal rights are subject to the Central Soviet, and I don't mean Russia. It's a style of centralized control. And it's going to be utilizing best science's technocracy. This is all on the books. You see how it's done. Part of that is, so the Agenda 2030 tells us this is about formulating sustainable debt. And that debt, your obligation to that is to live in austerity so they can keep you all down to where you can't do much. And part of that is to kill a bunch of you off. And it sounds like, this is all conspiracy theory. It's all in the documents, folks. So we've identified something coming on with that plan. Everyone called them chemtrails. We went through the arguments on all that stuff, and no one understands what the mechanisms are behind it either, and doesn't answer to it. That's my point. Okay, you know about it, now what? Now, it seems like a kind of a hopeless thing, but I've found in my research there are things you can do, and the more people that do those things, the louder it's that squeaky wheel condition. You can't just complain about it. And you can't complain even after you start sending your letters and no one's listening. Folks, I don't know that people appreciate what we did in 2013. If you can't understand that the problems that we've been having in moving the enforcement along are exactly the ignorance by those that have the seat of decision, duty, and obligation to look at that. If you can't tell by that a difficulty, and it's not over, we're not stopping. The point is it's not working pursuant to law should bother you to no end. That's your life. And then I've proven everywhere I can find it, every time I see it. You live in an open-air prison. I don't care how you want to create the anomaly or think you know what to say. You live in an open-air prison, however you want to show that, the plantation, all that stuff. You are in a place that's not controlled by you. That is the definition that you didn't keep the republic. That was an obligation on us, that they start spraying us and they start feeding us. They don't give us food, they give us feed, and we're all quiet to it. And so as long as there's only a few of us moving this along, and when you look at our lawsuit, and you watch how difficult it is to get the remedy, and this is I noticed something else I noticed this week. It's funny how it takes a long time to really analyze what a core problem may be. In fact, I had another situation this week, a rig died, and we try to figure out what it was at a distance. I mean, what's the problem when it's out in the middle of nowhere, how do we get it? And trying to resolve what it is, so you go out there just, as few times as possible to get it fixed. You realize, even though you know a subject matter fairly well, there's all these hidden little things that could go on that you got to kind of calculate for, and how little we do that. Now, we have to come up with a plan against this, or their plan will win. And I keep bringing to you week after week what that plan is, how it affects itself, the multidimensional aspects of it. And I bring you back the method, and then I bring you how we're going to defeat it. And I get the crickets. As I think about this, I really can't tell you how part of me is so disappointed in not having any engaged people with me, more than what we have, going at this thing with a big smile on your face, with the fervor, your arm sleeves rolled up, and kicking tail and taking names for the next tail kicking. This really is astonishing to me. I mean, and I tell you the microcosm, and I'm tempered a lot because I see the microcosm of the miner, a small, if I can use the word community, a small group of people in the nation that don't even make 1% of the whole population. So fundamental to this nation and every nation, miners, cannot get their act together, will fight me tooth and nail, will admit I'm a hardliner, will admit and never show that I don't know what I'm talking about. When I say I'll include my colleagues. The ones that work with me cannot be shown to be in error in the subject matters that we cover. And I told you we don't have the luxury of being wrong once, so this is a high bar we have set. That notwithstanding that proof in the law, we will get people that will go to other people in order to have them help. Remember what happens when you go to the government for help. So this is what's going on. We go to the government for help. Getting back over to my tabs, and I think today I realized what partly goes on in me right before the broadcast, that it changes all what I want to say. But when I'm listening up and through the broadcast as I'm preparing and setting up for about 2 hours today, in the day, I'm listening to other people. And man, there's a whole lot. I can't listen to other people without having the analysis start. I really can't. I have a trouble. That's why I can't really get involved with conversations, because when I hear things that are a little off, or something more importantly, I may be able to amplify. I may be able to add a big piece to. My mind starts to work on it. I can't shut that off. And so I've learned to back off on trying to get too involved in too many things that aren't someone's right that has to be made wrong that has to be made right, and working to help that. Just jabber I cannot listen to, but I listen to in the broadcast. And so by the time I'm getting to my broadcast, I've got a whole other set of thoughts than the ideas I put together for the tabs, maybe, up until the night before, even in the morning before I start listening. It's an interesting problem for me, but not a problem such that it's wanting to contribute to help where people may have a good idea running, and I want to help aid that, or I see they're going down the wrong path and want to add something. Like I was saying, James Corbett, he explains in a different way how the medical what this new age medical field was with Western medicine. And as I listen to it, I would hope that he understands that is exactly how the method underlying what they did, not what they did, but the method underlying what they did is able to be seen everywhere. So my question is, why isn't there no documentary done on everything? And this becomes one of choosing subject matters, but leaving out the rest, like the rest are not important. To me, they're all equally important. It's just how many people do we have to throw at it, and it should be every one of us, and then again my disappointment that it's not. I'm going to return to some news, some notice to us that I said we need to respond to, and to show you it's happening, and that we can still respond to it. And that's about all I can say. I would hope that you would actually be motivated to do something, even though, for as fruitless as it seems. Listen, folks, I don't know what to say. I don't know. You don't understand how, it's almost chills in me, for different reasons. When we sued the state, the governor of a state and the Bar Association and the political parties for the treason they caused, and we got zero answer, folks. You can't know how big a deal that is, that it just strikes me even, 3 or 4 years later. 3.5 years later since the default. Every time I'm saying it right now, I just am stunned at the silence and the admission and confession that happens there. How serious the matter is against us. That even so, and so many years on, I see hardly any tangible response. It doesn't mean that it's over what we're doing, but I would have thought that where there was opinion before, we settled that part. To champion that, and watching nobody do that has really been amazing. Instead, people make excuses. That's even more disheartening. And that's the fallen nature speaking. We want the shackles on our arms, our legs. We want the mental malware. We want that steak because it tastes so good. I don't know, I'm just stunned at some level. But let's get into what I was saying before. They're letting us know they're going to bring on, we were talking about the chemtrails, we're talking about that they're now going to make an excuse that they're going to be doing experimentation on you all and your environment, the real one, not the one they fabricated to say was being harmed. It wasn't a harm at all. The method, the real one, aerosols to protect Earth from, it's not you. It's the Earth. I can't even get through these titles. Even the titles, I can tell you, folks. It's all in the headlines. Aerosols to protect Earth from global warming will be sprayed into the stratosphere next year. There's your notice. Remember before it was soon, but didn't know when. Already within 2 weeks they've got next year. They haven't even got the setup done, but they've already got a scientific experiment ready to go. How do you figure that, folks? Well, they say it's science, but remember, we're going to find out it's only the experts who say, and it's in this document here, right off the top. Let me finish the title if I can get through it. Aerosols to protect the Earth from global warming will be sprayed into the stratosphere next year, but scientists warn the results could be catastrophic. Subtext line, experts will test the feasibility of solar engineering to stop global warming. Experts say, folks. The scientists say catastrophe. The experts are going to push the cherry red button to the nuclear device they actually think is going to continue and chain reaction's not going to stop. The experts will do all kinds of stuff. It's not about you. It's not about protecting you. And it's based on a fraud, this thing called global warming. Remember, it's not just any term. These terms are specific to who uses them. This ends up being anthropomorphic global warming, climate change. It's a ratio of a statistic on a hypothesis that hasn't been proven. That's all we're doing here. Remember, I told you before, they're reversing the problem. They have the cart before the horse. They're going to try and make it legitimate now. Experts say they're going to do an experiment. Now next year, they're going to spray you all as an experiment. It doesn't get better. Before they were just doing it and denying it. Now they're going to do it as an experiment to justify the fact when you look up, people will just say, oh, that's the experiment. I wonder how it's going. Cough, cough. So the experts are going to test the feasibility. The scientists are warning of results could be catastrophic. Do you want to test that could, and are you going to be silent on that? Do you think that when you're dead and gone, your offspring, your progeny, are going to be having something that they may not be able to deal with? I keep telling you all this stuff that's spraying out has been proven to us. If I never heard this when I was growing up, and if I never did hear it, and I didn't, they're telling us now everything that they feed to you, inject in you, spray in your environment, will change you genetically. Is that what you want for your future? The little ones you're bringing in, or have brought in? What excuse are you going to use not to protect that? I was hearing Ron Stephen talk about, the women stepping up. Why are they so active? And I'm not talking the feminists, the femans. I'm talking about the women. And he was saying, women, why are they standing up louder than the guys? And my observation is, I've told you before, a woman standing up is the mama bear. And that means Papa Bear didn't protect the cave, and Mama Bear has to fight. Why the women are so vocal right now is because the men didn't stand up. And in this case, this is against both of y'all, and that is a problem because none of you are responding. Oh, a letter won't mean nothing. Folks, you get enough letters, it starts to mean something. This thing had to come out because there is such an uproar that they're actually going to admit that they're going to do an experiment. It's a cover for another lie, and everyone has to buy into that lie. And I've been trying to explain to you how that works. And I get no response. I say no, but there's only a few. I see a few people speaking it. I know you all see it. But so few. And when I say that, don't think that because you might have an opinion that I'm talking about you getting it. I'm talking about when I can see the comments of those that get the process problem. And those people are also trying to do stuff in other places, so I know that they know what's going on. Those that don't and just talk, I can tell that too. I guess what I'm saying is you can't mess with someone who knows a subject matter. And you're just fooling yourself. You're not fooling anybody who knows the subject matter. You're fooling yourself. You're fooling those around you. And that's a shame. So here I am, behind the woodshed, giving the lickings, right? Here's the switch. Here's the principle. You're supposed to be here giving your own principles to someone else, not me giving it to you. This is where we are. This is how far away we are from what the so-called republic that we should keep. People don't even have a concept of what that is, and I only created the one I did from the land disposal law because it was so foundational to everything we did. From that, I can see quite a bit, actually, quite a bit. And wherever we bring it, wherever we lay it down, it silences all the critics. It's pretty fascinating to watch. They won't touch it. They can't touch this, folks. And I want you to be that which they cannot touch. Everyone's afraid. They live in fear. When you bring these things, you cannot be touched. And if you are, and you have a few people around you, there's a witness to the crime. A lot of people don't understand that background. You're not safe in any war, but you at least got the whodunit. You don't get into the who, what's, where, he said, she said, like in what they do in Syria or any other nastiness that you see going out in the world. You don't put yourself in those positions. So what does this tie it all to? This aerosols that are, what happened to the anyway, it doesn't, you got catastrophic problem coming. They're going to experiment on you. Title 50 in the United States Code tells you all about it. I've talked to that over in the past. I don't even know where to tell you to go to read it. It's all in the archives or the ones that are still available. They're all there. I've talked about all of this. I hear crickets on it. To the most part, this is coming. They're telling you now. This is the notice, not the news. This is the notice that they're going to do it. And based on what, you can go read who's doing it, what they're doing, and the scientists so-called say that that's no good. I have to say the scientists that are warning the catastrophic action, probably real scientists. How would you, what sane people would make an experiment on the environment they live in? Shouldn't be too hard a question to come to an answer about. This is what we're up against. It's not, also, it's not, don't rationalize it. You cannot, I have to tell my guys all the time that I'm working with, don't rationalize the insanity. Don't engage the insanity. We have to be just a step outside of it. Don't be consumed by it. And what this is all partly bringing, this so-called experiment is part of the bigger agenda, which came up in a discussion, which then it identifies the problem, but then it only focuses on one thing, which is always interesting to me how they show you this stuff, and then they all get your mind on one thing so that you don't think about the others. How automation and globalization has killed the middle class. Remember, we're talking, I'm going to advance this to the robotics and stuff, the technocracy here, folks. This is all part of the plan. Automation and globalization. We're now being told it's killing the middle class. And remember, this globalization has to do with your finances. It's a multi-pronged attack against you. What they bring up is very interesting. I can't talk in any exclusive manner here. You've got to go read through the whole thing and then understand more of it. But this came from the IMF Direct blog. Comes an interesting analysis of declining share of income going to workers, which is being driven by automation and globalization. After being largely stable in many countries for decades, the share of national income paid to workers has been falling since 1980s. Since the 1980s. That's right after the 74 embargo. It's right after they decoupled the gold, right? Right after. It takes a little bit. It's like a big mass engine having to be shifted and geared and turning down or getting more resistance. Put yourself in the time and bring it forward exactly what the dynamics are so you are there. And then you'll start to see this a lot easier as well. In fact, all this stuff you need to, while you're reading, you've got to put yourself, once you find quality information, put yourself in the moment of that time, and consider the facts in that moment in time and apply the reality you see there is critical to understanding at least what I start to see as I start to see it. And there's a lot of work to do there, but that's an ongoing thing, and you just kind of keep picking up what you can as you can. Chapter 3 of the April 2017 World Economic Outlook finds that this trend is driven by rapid progress in technology and global integration. So here there's a declaration that this global governance is killing people's labor, working. And I'm talking about the women now. I'm talking about you working. Now remember they said income. That's taxable income. That's because all y'all don't understand how to avoid or to challenge that you're not a person liable to the tax for the activity that's liable to the tax. And so this is a self-inflicted wound, but they're only speaking about these limited corporations, actually, that are producing their outcome and their output. But you are put in there as their slave, and you are being told that if you keep you involved in this system, you are being diminished. Not only is the value of the medium you use in exchange being fixed and diminished, your income, your direct income, then taxed on top of that, is being diminished by the plan. And so I don't want to get, I guess I could go on in more analysis. I just triggered. If you're interested in this, you'll start to look. You're the one that's going to analyze this for the fullness of it and go after this big time, or you're going to see it as a piece. For me, I don't focus on this. It's a piece of the puzzle, confirming things, and it aids me in understanding how and why it's important to make the distinctions I do with production versus economy, jobs, income. They're different. So labor is losing out. And I read that actually, was thinking a little bit about women. When we look at the mortality rate of the United States, it's losing out as well as they bring on this austerity, whether you agree to or not. At least the people in Europe get to vote and get openly denied. The people of the United States are so clueless and so absent that they're going to be brought onto it. They've been being brought onto it pretty directly, and because of a lot of dynamics, as we now are hearing, it's directly affecting how you think, what they feed you, what they inject into you, what they're going to spray on you some more. Labor is losing out. They got this graph. You can go through it. I have trouble with some of the graphs, but I'm distant from the subject matter because, as we found out very clearly, like in things like climate change, all their graphs were setups. It all depends. Again, statistics can be set up. You can prove anything in statistics. And guess what? Okay, so we have a relationship to a statistic is the basis of climate change. I'm not talking about climate change here. I'm talking about climate change only to the extent it's part of this labor losing out. This notice to us that automation and globalization was the plan to take you out. It's not that science and technology is so bad. It's that it's used as a plan to take you out, and you're helpless to it as well. So I want to bring up a little sidetrack issue. Stop being labor. Stop being these so-called workers and do work. Don't be a worker. It's like in land disposal. You work in bringing out and extracting wealth, as the miner does, as the farmer does, as the timber and logger does, as the rancher does. From nature, you bring out the wealth nature has to offer. And you bring it into people. It's not labor. It's not income. It's not the worker in a class of industrial, underneath the industrial code that way. And when you understand these things, you'll start to see what I've been trying to explain in oh so subtle ways, because I don't want to, again, silver bullet. You think it's a silver bullet, it's not. There's a big comprehensive understanding. When you see the chasm, I now realize is what I've seen for a couple decades. And now I can put it more clearly into perspective, utilizing land disposal law or the law of the land. And I know I'm speaking to the United States of America because it is unique that way. It's really not in any other place. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be developed from other places. I'm not versed in other places. But in all of the British colonies, whether you call that Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Britain itself, and any place else, the Falklands, there is an underlying foundation that did translate. But when it translated, it changed certain relationships with people and their property as a foundation of the established existence of the people itself. And that is what I start to focus on. If you can develop that in your other countries, and it's not limited to the Crown, but it could be other countries that have these very similar things, look for them and pull them out. You make the chasm that cannot be crossed, and then you defend it. You don't have to you make sure that no one builds a bridge. Remember, bridge building is no good here. This is what these people that are invading, they're bridge builders. They're bridging from their side, even across into constitutions. They bridge across and they deconstitutionalize you, and then they try to bridge into their production. They bridge into your commerce because they're a political entity, and they try to bridge onto your production. Your production is not political. Your production is literally the staff of life of the nation. And so I've been able to see this very clearly. I don't know that there's many people that have ever really looked at it this way. I may be the only, I may be one of the few, but there was only going to be a very few of us. But I keep trying to tell you what this is about. Hope I inspire you to look at this thing and make it important, because it defeats all of this. It defeats every bit of this. You won't be labor. Oh, be labor. So that's an actual word. Be labor. Be labor the point. You won't be that. You will be different. And you will have a knowledge in you, not because I say, but because you've researched it accurately and applied it to be able to show the distinction and the difference that makes the difference. So this is a part, globalization is really the overall view of what's going on. They're telling you, they're beating you at every turn if you stay in that status. They're going to use spraying to keep you down there. Now, last week we talked about, and I told you they're going to start promoting this no different than they were going to make cannibalism cool. So and they brought us on the spinach people, and you're going to eat your Soylent Green cracker because cannibalism is cool, and it'll be an honor to sacrifice yourself to the collective. You'll be given high praises for that. But to keep track of all this, we talked last week that in that one company that everyone was, I told you that they're going to make it cool to be microchipped, and here it was. It wasn't just a couple days later. The headlines are telling us. They're giving you notice. Everyone is doing it. This is the mind plant, the seed plant, the mental malware that's now injected. Everyone is doing it. Injecting microchips is cool. So I told you before, folks, it's coming down to when I'm seeing stuff. There's almost no time between the week anymore. If I don't catch it, it's the week. I'm not able to tell you about it, and they're already on to the point, and on they go. The memory hole is filled. I told you it was coming. They were going to promote these microchips as cool. I told you last week they were indicating that when they said, oh, it's going to be, we have now microchip parties for the cyborgs we are now. Here it is. Next week. I mean, was it 3 days? I don't even think. If it was that, I mean, it was, anyway, the government isn't quite ready to force microchip injections on citizens, but if you want to do it on your own, it just makes tracking you and your data that much easier. For a sentence. So I told you a long time ago, they're going to get you to put the gun to your head and pull the trigger. And it's happening. That is one of the methods. This is the buy-in. You hook, line, and sinker. You groupers. You school of fishes. Yeah, swim with the fishes, they said. And realize that was going to be your life. You thought it was just a mafia remedy. No, this is the future of your life. You're going to choose this stuff. Okay, so they promote it, right? It's now microchipping's cool. Cannibalism's cool. All this stuff is cool, folks, because they need you, not you. See, all of us that are old enough realize this insanity, and you just kind of dismiss it, and then you don't do anything, and that's our problem. We really have to engage from there. We're going to have to bring the principles we understand now because they're all being forgotten. I told you the memory is being changed. As soon as the first generation to not memorize a thing is the first generation that loses that thing. And let me touch on that before I forget again. I noticed this last week, and I don't know where it all kind of formulated in my mind. I'm always doing it myself, although I keep telling you about our lawsuit, so I'm not divorced from it. I just don't explain that side. Most people are focused, and I've said it before, you only have the rights that you assert, and I say rights are property as well, or interests and other things that you can find. There's something that you can claim as your own, whether they are inherent or whether they are provided through the society. And I, in some regard, don't care one way or the other. It depends on what you're going to do with that, really. And we provided, in the original republic, we provided for that to ourselves, whether that be the federal government, the state government, or the people, not the legislature, but the people, the men and women themselves. That I know it occurred to me that I haven't really made this reference, and I haven't heard many people make the reference. We keep talking about our rights, and we keep talking about the law and all that stuff. I want to remind you, and referencing it to our lawsuit in 2013, that we didn't assert our rights in 2013 more than declare what they were and asserted a remedy in equity. What we did in 2013 is a remedy in equitable jurisdiction, in the equity jurisdiction. So, a lot of people will say, well, that's judge-made stuff. Well, it might be, but it's really based on premise of foundation of law. And so, what I noticed, a lot of people would say, oh, there's a law. Where's the law? They'll ask the question. Well, I have these rights, that will say. You don't have a right just because you declare it. And I noticed people are like truncating the notice to us in the Constitution of the United States of America. When they talk about law and equity, it's conjunctive, and it is a two-part point. The law can restate rights. It can create rights. The law is usually on its own used to beat you down with those same laws, but it's tied to an equity remedy. Law, it can only be applied to the limit of an equity remedy that you have to assert. So when you just say, I have a law, I have a law, I have a law, I have a right, I have a property, it really means nothing. And this gets us back to proper application. If you're just talking about it and always using law remedies in a law or legal court, that isn't enforcing the property or the right. You have to go and seek a remedy to enforce that right or property or benefit or whatever it is, a privilege to you that you can identify in the law or prior to the law or before, antecedent the law and the construction of the government. If you don't have utilize the remedy, then you don't have what you're claiming. The only way to enforce the law, the rights, the property, the remedy, the remedy itself is finding a remedy. And there's really a handful. There's not that many. So when everybody blows this all out of proportion, they're not doing themselves a service. That when I point to what we did in 2013, we just didn't talk about the rights we had. We said we are asserting a remedy to enforce and protect those rights and property. We went law, and then we went to equity jurisdiction. In this case, the equitable remedy we chose, the extraordinary remedy they'll call it, and it is extraordinary in what you have to show, but those should be readily apparent when you are asserting that property or rights or interest or deficit or whatever it is that you're doing. The equity of injunction, the remedy of injunction is an enforcement of those rights or property that asserts, that actually gets you the law. And I think that's been a big mistake for a lot of people, not understanding these remedies and how they work. And they're specific and they're pretty exacting, but they're really simple in some regard. Once you get past the exactness of it and you understand them, because you claim the law gives you a right, how are you supposed to get that? That's in the remedy. And this is where you start finding out when you don't have a remedy, you don't have a law. So I can backtrack through and show you don't have a law here. This country's not working under law at this point. And there's not enough of you doing remedies to prove that out and improve and force the system to start giving it under penalty of other remedies when they fail. And so, as I say, the process of enforcement is a continuing of the remedies available as you effect and assert your property rights or interests or other things that you're owed or due or not to be interfered or infringed. And so all y'all thinking you're going to do a lawsuit, and you think a lawsuit is where you're going to do it, I'm going to suggest to you missed an interpretation. You'll notice the lawsuits is where you most likely get beat down. And those lawsuits have to have a pre-stated damage. And when then you go up against the government or the official that's doing it, you haven't proven that they have done anything wrong, and they're presumed to have done right. So now you come as a plaintiff with a double burden. It's a lot more burden. You have to prove your damages as well. And when you live in an open-air prison, what's your damages against the warden? It ultimately boils down to due process. Okay, so you sue for that. But if you didn't have a process to begin with that they denied you in, what's your cause? What's your standing? And so people don't understand this law and equity condition. The equity is what you learn. You have to learn the remedies and exercise them, and they have to be done. And you're still up against the criminal system. But this is my shock as to why, despite the criminal system, nobody answered. Of 10 major players, nobody answered our complaint, our claim. It really wasn't a complaint; it was a claim. And it wasn't dissolved like presume the equity remedy when you bring it prima facie presumes presumes the claim is correct. And it must be, if you look at the rules, it says in the equity rules, and they're up, equity is up in the federal rules, up in Rule 50s and 55, 56, 60, up in there, you'll find them up in there. And I think, they blended admiralty and equity, so it's an even further conditioning, an interesting conditioning there. So this is why I also speak to international law. So there's your remedy. It's up in those rules. You're not having to produce the money damage. You don't have to make a claim for money. It's strictly on the power of the property or the right. And so I've been noticing, I noticed this just recently. I hadn't noticed it really before. I've only hear people talking about law, lawsuit. What you have to actually do to at least start the process, at least show that there's a criminal in the mix, even if it's civil, even if you're not criminal now, unless you do racketeering. You're not a private, what they call the private attorney general, in quotes. Now, don't get all wild about that. It's just an enforcement capacity that Congress allows. You have to find it. If you can't state that, you aren't one. So understand that. But private remedy for harm of property rights could be these writs. When you call them common law writs, they're actually these equity remedies. and you make your prima facie case, that's a claim. That claim stands as a presumption of fact until it can be dissolved. Look very carefully. In other words, when you file the claim, it is in effect. If they can't dissolve within the statutory time, which is less than 5 days, they did not dissolve the claim. It stands. Now, we're not talking about on and on, are we? We're not talking about weeks and months. No, equitable remedies are extraordinary, irreparable harm that you've shown that need an immediate remedy. It's not law. No, you refer to law, we're giving you the property, but it's not the law. We're doing equity. So, I think I've said enough there. Don't focus on some of this too tightly. You really got to understand what's going on. And I noticed it never occurred to me. I always hear people about doing lawsuits. We talk generally about lawsuits, streetwise lawsuit, but we're not doing a damages claim in the regard of money damages to get and identify the wrongdoer and get them to stop. So these remedies they come by different names and different functions. We utilized quo warranto in our own lawsuit to stop the clerk and the judge who didn't have jurisdiction, and no court had authority over our claim. It was an article, it was a legislative court. Whatever article it was under, they never declared it, so we really don't know. I just can surmise my research. But it was not it was a legislative court, not an Article 3 court. So we used a quo warranto remedy to challenge the trespass. And they failed to respond. And then the judge, so-called, the senior judge, which is not an Article 3 judge, in his first sentence, opening sentence, says, I have no jurisdiction, but. And so the rest of the order is invalid, and they didn't answer. Notwithstanding a whole lot of other things. And so we used two equity remedies to assert the property and obtain a default judgment. So it's law and equity. You have the law, and you assert remedy to make sure the law is fulfilled. That becomes a problem here, admittedly, where the system that's supposed to be giving you the things that law allows and provides or honors, as in grants, or antecedent the government itself, before the establishment of the government. As you see, your claim of possession and usufruct is in the highways. It's a claim before the government. You now see the trust in that statement of the government owing to the people. It's not a power and a sovereignty. It's an obligation and duty. But you see the remedy we used was an injunction and then a writ of quo warranto to validate that the people that were going to trespass had the lawful authority. So it wasn't law we asserted, it was equity. Under the common law of those, the recognized common law for those assertions. So, I think I've said enough there. If you follow, don't get stuck in the law. It's law and equity. It's conjunctive, though, and there ties them together. Now, I've said a whole lot of people's eyes are rolling back, probably tuned away. I can't hear this stuff, but this is our failure. If you have, and if you're listening and confused, then you haven't read enough about the remedies and start to really think how when you have someone come against you that doesn't have authority, what one of those half a dozen remedies would I do? You got quo warranto, writ of mandamus, writ of prohibition. You've got the injunction. There's a handful. They seem to be, as I can tell, they seem to be sufficient. I wouldn't say that you're going to get justice. You're going to have a denial of justice. It's been shown me that these aren't silver bullets. That when the corruption is complete, as it was against me, I was denied the access to the court, and it didn't seem to faze anybody in the system. In that case, I didn't care that I got denial of justice or access to the court, because in the process, what I was suing to enjoin, the one I was suing removed their obstruction. And so even though I was denied on the injunction claim and other things, declaratory judgment, the relief was given in the suit, in just the notice that there was a suit. And so we take a win there, even though I realized then you can be blocked out of the court. If you think you have access to the court, I can tell you that you don't have access to the court. There is an overbearing denial of justice, and that informed me when we did our lawsuit in 2013. When we did the equitable remedy, I realized I had to take the system out of the picture. In federal court, it's much easier to do that because of the known studies, for research you can do to explain that these district courts generally, that I've talked to you before, are legislative courts. They're not law courts. They're not actually the equity courts either, even though they're following these rules. And when we required by remedy of the writ of quo warranto for the clerk of that legislative court, or the judge, so-called, to prove they had authority underneath the court we invoked under Article 3, they defaulted and failed. So, now, we have the default judgment. We proved there is in the seats of decision, there's a denial of justice. We proved there's a denial of justice still. That's an international law. This rises now to the height of international law. If you think I'm deluded about this, I'm exposing something to everybody. The district is exposing some things to everybody, and I'm dismayed that people don't understand that. So, moving from international law now to my tabs, back to my tabs, this is why we start seeing what's going on in the world. I told you 2010, the memo told everybody, if no one else got the memo, we did behind the woodshed, that the United States was going to go extrajudicial. In fact, throwing out the very Libra code I told you they were operating under, that not everybody might, a lot of people might have agreed, but didn't really maybe understand the fact of that. They mentioned the Libra code, said they're not going to recognize it, which is international law now since, the Geneva Convention of 1899 or something, 1907, whatever. You can find all this stuff. I've talked about it. They threw that out, and they went extrajudicial. That was our first notice. There was no international law that was going to be recognized. Now we did what? We did crickets. We've been doing crickets. I've been doing crickets because you all have been crickets. But this pretended, our 2013 suit based on my denial of access to a state court to remedy a wrong against me, violating the rules completely is what the system did, showed me what I had to do when we moved into the more important discussion of against the rights of the minor and the JMD lawsuit, and how I was going to have to take out that system that was denying me. I knew they would deny us, and I knew they would deny the district at the point of believing their orders mean anything. And so you can't just unilaterally say that their orders don't mean anything. They're presumed to mean something. You have to make a remedy before the fact, if you will, to prove that it's not. And that's how we proceeded. So if you miss the law and equity provision, together components, you're missing what's going on, and I think that's what is helping defeat you and why you start taking your attitude that this is not viable. And then I tell you the caveat, even where it's viable, what you're doing is making a record that it's true. They admit to being criminals in the seats of decision. They're admitting literal, if I didn't understand what treason was, I do now. They're admitting to making war on the laws, which show that they're non-constitutional. They're foreign to you. If I can not head and show it any other way, they do it by their admission and confession that they'll make war on the laws that gave you the property that remedy should have been inequity that they are also ignoring. It's showing you can take the system out, but as long as those criminals are sitting in the seat of decision, until the mass of people throw those people out, we're going to have a problem as a people. What we do have is an ongoing evidence and witness of their criminal activity, which most everyone else that I can see doing this in whatever fashion cannot say. Their opinion is that, but they can't show it. The law and equity, especially the equity, will start to create the proof that you need. And I'm hoping, and for all of you all that say and dismiss this, you become my problem. You want to dismiss it, and then you sit there as a cricket doing nothing instead of saying, wow, that's right. That's where you've been messed up. I'm going to advocate your position because it's the one proving the fact. It's not just an opinion. I'm going to advance this cause. Oh, wait a minute. What is that cause? And then contact me so I can start helping you figure out what you want to do with what we proved. Understand, if we've proven that the Bar Association and that the courts that it creates and them as agencies of the state is a treason, you can walk in with that as your first statement of avoidance. and you start your record to other people about how you do not live, just literally live in an open-air prison. You get what you gave. And it's that way because we are so far removed from law and equity. Now even international law fails, and this is when I'll get me over to my tabs again. There was in this Trump turning warmonger, conceding, like a little child, conceding some authority over to the neocons as a symbolic gesture to protect his neck, apparently. He went and bombed an airstrip of no consequence. I've seen ranges from $100 million to $200 million to send a bunch of apparently ineffectual missiles that now Raytheon's going to ask more money for now that they need 59 more. But there was a response finally from Assad, and it was he points out 4 points of attack 4 points from President Assad's first post-attack interview. It is a government interview, but somehow I look at the guy, I don't think he's lying to us. So, and he didn't verify anything I hadn't already confirmed for myself last week to you. But their response is already out, and it's important, I thought, that you understand that they're responding here to the lack of international law. So when you think that nothing's working for you, well, nothing's working for the president of Syria either, even with the help of Russia in attempting to get other bully sovereign nations to comport with international law. So as I told you, their problem is our problem. I keep telling you, this is not a distinction and difference that you can disregard and think it's over there. Everything they evidence is everything that's happening to us. The U.S., to us. No, the people, men and women. And it's up to us because of the obligation and duty we have to throw it off. And if you didn't think that you were underneath that establishment, you can disregard it. You're still under it. That's your voluntarism at work. Voluntarism is absolute. You either fight against the wrong or you agree to it. That's voluntarism. Everyone that you want to get into your patriot stuff is tacit acceptance. All right, so you all know now it's on you. For all of those that you think the UCC is what it's all about, it's just an indication of what's out there, all being disregarded or applied to you, depending on who the power is. And power is the one who has the right to make the change. 4 key points. President Assad speaks a bit to the international law that's not being regarded. And I'll just go through the list, just a quick list. I won't read it. I think it's important for you to see what he says. I was waiting for this guy to talk. I wanted to see him. I like to see the video because I like to watch him. And I just can't tell you, folks, I can't see this guy being too deceptive at all. And so, and again, you back it up. First, you come in with the law, and when he's seeing that the violations to him is really violating the law as well, and the international provisions, and how helpless the UN is to do anything, you realize it's the tool of the U.S. It's like it is. The UN is like it is. It is us. Why else do you think it's sitting on the United States soil, folks? But Assad says, Russia did not have time to warn him. Apparently, they were talking about, and I don't even know what made difference. United States, Trump made an order to go bomb a sovereign nation without any reason, zero reason. As I said last week, imaging. This is all about imaging. They use images, and they reuse images in order to get to persuade some discussion. No different than Colin Powell lifting the vial of anthrax. The vial was even a prop. But it was, more importantly, it's a lie. Not having any right to do what they did. But there was a big deal of question, well, did Russia not warn President Assad? He says that there was no time. We don't know. I've got to take the gentleman's word for it, but he did say there was clues, something telegraphed ahead, and they moved a lot of stuff out of there. So it wouldn't be any effective. And it wasn't. He says they were actually bombing the next moment. I mean, as soon as they could get the runway cleared off of any debris and other things that they could use, they had fighters going back out. So a lot of money was spent for nothing on someone who had no cause, and then your mainstream media was feeding you that it was, and even though those of you know that that's a lie, you're just sitting there saying it's not. I'm not hearing anybody formulating the final straw for you somewhere about using these techniques, identifying how they get done, and then finding locally where they're being done and attacking that. If you can't stop the war in Syria, because I know I can't. All I can do is using it as an example, as a mirror. As I told you, the Middle East is a mirror to what's going on in the United States right in front of your face. No retaliation against U.S. forces. Contrary to fake news reports throughout the mainstream and out media reports which were debunked, Syria, like Russia and Iran, are not planning military retaliation against U.S. forces. So you see, the narrative was made, it was being promoted, it's all the propaganda piece. The president of Syria is saying, we're really out of this thing the way that worked. We received the attack, but we have no advanced knowledge of it, and we're just sitting here attempting to fight the terrorists. And we're being hindered in how that is. Number 3, the attack did little damage to Syria's fighting capacity, as I said before. And then number 4, Assad would still be willing to work with the U.S. under certain conditions, and I don't see a problem with that. And the certain conditions is that they actually and really fight the terrorists. But the terrorist is us. The terrorist is. The terrorist is Britain. The terrorist is Israel. Qatar. And we're not playing music. Saudi Arabia. Others. That's the terrorist. That's why it's not going down. And it bothers me a bit that Americans will continue to allow themselves to at least look so gullible and even supporting someone like Trump at this point that committed a war crime on people in another place. On nothing but images. Up until today, folks. Do you get that? It's been a week since it's kind of an odd thing. I put my voice out there and I put my position down. I attempt to do my proof as summary as it ends up being for the broadcast. I don't have all the time in the world. I haven't been shown different in what I said last week. In fact, there's articles showing exactly more, confirming as it comes out. People are now seeing certain things. They're seeing how this all works. But this 4 points is involved in a video that Assad says is involved in a video. You'll get a link to the video as well. I did notice some post-edit cuts, so it wasn't an interview that was untouched. But that would maybe bother me a bit, but not so much. The other things he says looks like it's fairly straight up. And I'm going to have to take the presumption of innocence first, and then we will have the guy who's making the accusations make the proof. And we'll see how they respond later. We'll give them the credit, at least to charge them with something on evidence. That the United States, Britain, Israel is not doing for this guy. That nobody in the UN is allowing it to, except maybe Russia or Bolivia maybe, to do for this problem. Now, we talked last week again and kind of doing the recap on how quickly all this, this didn't take long. All these things didn't take long to prove out from last week. It's really just a kind of, it's really beyond me at some point. I'm just wondering when I'm going to be run down and just can't keep up with it all. Not that I'm trying to keep up. I want you to see the notices are all there before they happen, and then they show up. And not that you even care about that. I could care less about this. It's explaining, I'm telling you there's a process at work in the world that you can defeat. And here's the evidence of the process at work in the world that could be defeated, and you have a part to play in that, in this play. Even Assad even talks, and this is all these people, the Trump and all these people, they're just playing a part in their play. The stage. The world is a stage, and you play your part in it. And if you don't, you're an accessory to the crime against you and everyone. Although when you agreed to it, it ceases. When you do not act against the crime, it's understood that you agree and you do not have a complaint about the crime. Getting over to who may have had the influence, a very interesting study here, writing. Jared Kushner fired me over Israel 10 years ago. This is a confirmation of what we were talking about, what I was talking about last week is not so conjectural surmise, I suppose, looking and seeing even the Orthodox Jewish faith does not recognize this kid that has Trump's ear, the father-in-law, to do essentially war crimes, and ineffectual responses as well. But this is someone who dealt with Kushner when he bought the New York Observer, and this writer was a writer then or a resource for this New York Observer, which makes some very interesting connections. Now, what I noticed, is all the words and names that they have, to my knowledge, And the connections, like, let's say, to even Harvard are in here. All the same players, folks. I say, look at all the same players from the same places. They all appear to have what we might consider to be a Jewish surname. And I've told you, I'm real hesitant on using this word Jewish because it's really only a belief system. Even the Orthodoxy doesn't see Kushner as a practicing Jew or non. You can't be a non-practicing Jew. You're not in the religion then. You're just making stuff up. And so this is a first-hand witness account of who this guy Kushner is, what he did, who he was involved in, who he's been involved with, who this writer's been involved with. It all sounds like it would be, again, advisedly Jewish surnames. And yet you get down and there's an admission by one of those people that they're all Zionists in this one article. A statement of the first-hand witness author of this article says all these people he's talking about at the New York Observer are Zionists. That's the political faith I've been telling you is actually the war criminal faith. It's not a faith, it's a political belief system that Kushner is advancing. And it's an extreme view. So, in one article, fairly well confirmed what I was not so conjecturing about last week. Just from some articles that not even the Jewish Orthodoxy recognizes this kid. That he's known to not, as I tell you, you don't know what you don't know. He doesn't know that. It's even said that he believed that the one observation was this kid's got ice in his veins, but he also doesn't know what he doesn't know. This is a very dangerous condition. This is someone who should have went through at least, and I don't mean this in the political skullduggery side, but this is someone who should have been into international affairs a lot longer than handing the tiller of the warship of state and getting the ear of a father-in-law to go bomb people and then only do it on the image that they've provided so that they can pull your heartstrings or not. It didn't matter, did it? As I went through and I read here, let me read that paragraph so you see I'm reading from something and not making this stuff up. Whether or not this is being made up to me, that's always, I'm only the first-hand witness to what's written. I have to accept certain things. Other proofs, as I did last week, and this is why I'm even talking about it, prove this out. That we're not talking about people that are of Jewish faith, we're talking about one of political interests. And that political interest has no place in Palestine, let me remind you. But it's one paragraph says, but that couldn't last. And this is this guy's contribution to this Observer. And he was writing, he went to study, he was paid by Kushner's paper or publication to go over to Israel and see what was going on. And his review of that was that, well, his description was here, the frank description of apartheid in Hebron. He came back with a view of what was going on in Israel in the occupied areas by the so-called Israelis was an apartheid. And so that description and printing, that publication, he said couldn't last. In February of 2007, keep the year back, 2007, Kaplan closed his office door and said he was a Zionist. Kushner was a Zionist. Kepner was a Zionist. And the janitor was a Zionist too. And the newspaper would not pay me to blog, as I was demanding at the time. I was only paid for published columns. It was fitting I was gone. So out of the word of a witness that was living this and lost his job, or his whatever he did, his publication, his labor, his contract, whatever you want to call it, you want to commingle all that. It was the product of his life. He says all these people are Zionists. So if you walk in and think these are so-called Jews, and in a religious context, you're wrong. If you think that these people are coming underneath the faith to go bomb other people, then you're wrong. And those that think they're in the faith that can go bomb other people, they're wrong. And those that are not practicing in the faith are not practicing or not in the faith. If they agree with the warmongering, they're wrong. I suppose I'm talking about oppressors. We're just talking about political oppressors here. We're not talking about anything other than that. And Kushner apparently had the ear of the man that could cause the destruction, as incompetent as it was as well, and thankfully. So another report coming about this Trump decision on Syria, that Trump has a new red line that they've drawn, and what was recited was a very interesting thing that came out of the press secretary's mouth about what's now going on. And and this report was complete in that most people identified the first one as interesting, the first statement out of the mouth of Spicer and what the administration is now doing, which is not now, it's been doing it. Slipped out of his tongue, but this article also picks up the other one I noticed that not a lot of people picked up or knew the two happened together within days of each other, that is telltale of what's going on underneath the Zionist leadership of the White House. And President Kushner, if I can give him that credit only as a notice of a very big problem. Most people don't want to call him out. This is a treason, folks, and so you put that where you will. That's my observation. I don't have a cause and effect in it at this point. Probably won't ever. But until we get the mindset that something very terrible is going wrong, for whatever reason, we're going to be gullible, and most of the people around us will be gullible, and the ripple effect of destruction continues. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer will give us a little bit of the actual inside knowledge of what the United States' plan has been, and we're going to get some reports now as we go through to show you that this is a long-term attack on an innocent, essentially an innocent, not an adjective innocence, it's an innocent nation. It's a nation that hasn't done really any wrong, as far as certainly not to what they've been told. Now, whether or not, I don't think that they're perfect. They've done things, but it seems that every government does things, unsavory things, but not enough that we go make up stories on imaging and attack them. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer experienced a Freudian slip, if you can call it that. Again, all these terms are kind of excuses to me. He made a statement. Experienced a Freudian slip when he accidentally said America's goals in the region was to, quote, destabilize Syria. He said it. You go back, you get this article. I don't know if he's got all the articles. Go find this. He actually says it, so you hear it out of his lips. And then go find the other article where he says it again on some CNN or some interview. He says it again. And that time he doesn't go back and backtrack and try to fix it. So this article says that I'm reading says he accidentally said it as a Freudian slip. I don't think so, folks. He says their intention, the governments, the United States government, and Israel, and all the others, Britain, France, all Europe, European Union, is to destabilize Syria. And he says it again. This article points it out. Just one day before Secretary of State Rex Tillerson went to Moscow, he told reporters the U.S. would come to a defense of innocent civilians, quote, anywhere in the world. If you think that anywhere in the world is a problem, where his intention and stated intention of the United States is to destabilize wherever you are in the world, this means you have something to do. They're going to use the excuse of innocent civilians to go anywhere in the world to destabilize your area. When you watch babies and children being gassed and suffer under barrel bombs, you're instantaneously moved to action, the press secretary said. I think this president made it very clear that if those actions were to continue, further action will definitely be considered by the United States. What? That he's going to lie, do imaging, and he's going to lie and work on lies on a Zionist agenda to go bomb the very innocents that he's supposedly going to be protecting? Remember, more civilians died in the tomahawking, whoop whoop, essentially of a foreign sovereign. Barrel bombs? When did that come up? That just comes up whenever they want to. It wasn't even in this part where they were talking about the chemical weapons, so they're, again, making stuff up. So this is the new red line. For Trump, he's just accepting what the plan has been the entire time. Well, let's go back a little bit. Where's the admissions to all this, you might say? Well, isn't this your opinion? Okay, well, I'm going to refer to WikiLeaks for all whatever you think about WikiLeaks. It hasn't been shown to be wrong. I don't know what its underlying political agendas are. I don't know who's actually running it. It hasn't shown to be wrong. And if it is a minorly, it hasn't been shown substantially. And I haven't found the minor one yet. Not that I go through thousands and tens of thousands of documents. What percolates through seems to be accurate enough. But on WikiLeaks, it was presented an email from Clinton, the one that didn't get in the office that Trump supposedly beat. Al-Qaeda, in brackets, which is the topic, is on our side in Syria. This is from the policy advisor to the Secretary of State of Hillary Clinton. And they give you the link. I give you the link to this. You can read it yourself. Says after the subject, see last item, AQ, Al-Qaeda. How guttural, how do I choke on that, folks? Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, Al-CIA, is on our side in Syria. Otherwise, things have basically turned out as expected. This was done back in 2012. I responded to a lot of this discussion. There was more WikiLeaks that came out. In the text of these emails and letters, they were speaking about overthrowing the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Remember, he's not a regime. He's been a democratically elected official, just like anybody else would democratically elected official, good, bad, or indifferent. He's elected by the people. Not a regime. It's only a regime because there's some foreigners that call him that, give you the idea, or some of the people that believe this, that he needs to be taken out like they have a say. What happened to the people standing up for themselves? No one comes to stop the harm against you by the oppressor and occupier in your life, do they? That should be an interesting analysis for you all. But to overthrow the regime of Assad, and I ask why. And then you find in this other article that you can get a link to through the Twitter, it says, a quote, Israel's understandable fear of losing its nuclear monopoly was why, folks. An admission in this document, this official document, that Israel is nuclear capable. If you didn't if you didn't have another thought, or you were hearing the denials as a truth. The reason why they're going after this guy, at least one reason, is Israel's understandable fear of losing its nuclear monopoly. Was why they were going through Bashar al-Assad to get to Iran. Israel is a nuclear nation, no matter what we've heard. This was in official records. My comment to that also was, based on this nuclear monopoly now, is that Iran was 0, and Israel, as we've been told, is at least 200 plus nuclear devices. They have a monopoly on. This is not even a state, folks. This is a group of people with a political agenda that have the bomb. Now, you thought North Korea was a problem. You notice how that popped up? We're also looking all over that one, folks. Forgot all about this kind. Israel has a monopoly in the Middle East on nuclear weapons. The problem with that is Iran. And they need to get through Syria in order to do that. Just take them out so that Israel will maintain its nuclear monopoly. Can you please run that through your mind a couple times until it impresses upon you how dire this whole thing, how much of a lie this is when you start thinking about what Kushner just professed to Trump, and Trump allowed. But this was all prepared and detailed to everybody before the election. How far back now? So we attack people, we use our big munitions, big expensive stuff. Another thing happens just a few days later, like now we're trying to assert, all of a sudden there's been a flicking of a switch. Trump is now going to be the warmonger that he said he wasn't going to be. And this is the news, the talk of the town. Well, you said you weren't. Why aren't you? Why are you changing your tune now? But this mother of all bombs was just dropped. It was, $16 million on its own. Biggest bomb we have. found out Russia has one 4 times bigger, so it's, doesn't matter. We want to go to the major players, and it's just a matter of who drops what. But what did they drop that bomb on? Now, how long ago has this been in the works that the Secretary of State knows that has been denying and knows that Israel has nuclear monopoly, that they also have Al-Qaeda in their pocket because they created it, and all the other facts and proofs. But a little report come out back, I think, in 2005, as I have the link from the New York Times. This bomb that they dropped in Afghanistan now is in Tora, Bora. Now I'm bringing your mind back to Osama bin Laden's times, and the CIA funded and financed the jihad in the 1980s against the Soviet occupation. Rising more than 13,000 feet, 35 miles southwest of the provincial capital of Jalalabad, Tora Bora was a fortress of snow-capped peaks, steep valleys, and fortified caves. Its miles of tunnels, bunkers, and base camps dug deeply into the steep rock walls have been part of a CIA-financed complex built for the Mujahideen. This is 2005. This is after 9/11. Remember, this is all the plan, folks. Bin Laden had flown in dozens of bulldozers and other pieces of equipment, heavy equipment, from his father's construction empire, the Saudi Bin Laden Group, one of the most prosperous construction companies in Saudi Arabia and throughout the Persian Gulf. Same players, same place. According to one frequently told story, don't forget, Bin Laden was, I think, if I remember it, I can say this way, he was a CIA asset. Then it goes on to say, according to one frequently told story, Bin Laden would drive one of the bulldozers himself across the precipitous mountain peaks, constructing defensive tunnels and storage depots. This is apparently what that mother of all bombs just blew up, something the CIA had created back in to thwart the Soviets. So we're destroying our own infrastructure, and we must have a purpose for all that. So something has shifted. But this was based on what? A CIA document reveals a plan to destroy Syria. Remember, Afghanistan, we're now bombing the tunnels we made in today. We're bombing the tunnels we made in the 80s, beginning 80s. And the CIA document is 1983, reveals the plan to destroy Syria, foreshadow current crisis. This is a plan. It's all coming out about what it is. They also have a picture here about the oil pipeline, so that's part of it. Don't get focused just on the mineral stuff. That's all part of it. These people will plunder everything. Everything is available for plunder here. Prophetically foreshadowing the current crisis. Is it a prophetic foreshadowing, or is it the plan, folks? And what did I say before? That's the problem, isn't it? So the problem is the plan. Prophetically foreshadowing the current crisis, leaked CIA documents from the reign of Bashar al-Assad's father in the 1980s show the Washington deep state, so-called, plan coalescing. They want to blame this deep state like it's some other party. This is the government itself, folks. This is just what they're doing. Trump's in on it now. Kushner's been in on how he got involved so quick. Has to have been part of the plan as well. We could all see this, but now it's so quickly. It's not even, a couple months. It's all coming out. That illegitimate state on a political belief is occupying a place and not a nuclear-powered non-state monopoly. Should bother you a lot more than Kim Jong-un and his little pea shooters. That they now have you focused on that it's going to decimate the whole United States. Did you take your pills, folks? You going to buy some of those now? You're going to get Alex Jones over there going to sell them to you? Deep state plan, this is a government plan, coalescing to, quote, bring real muscle to bear against Syria, toppling its leader, severing the ties with Russia, and paving the way for an oil and gas pipeline of Washington's choosing. Now, what I want to touch on this real quickly is it appears that the United States in Jordan and Britain are amassing some power, and it looks like they may be going up the south and east side of Syria now in a straight line. It looks like they're going to push in, because I have a suspicion, and I don't know this, but where the pipeline was going to go, they can't go straight across Syria. They may actually take the longer route and go southwest, down in through Jordan and over into Israel, because they're amassing a whole lot of things. When we started bombing this eastern, south and eastern side of Syria, it looked like they were moving and marshaling troops, and then there was a call for 150,000 troops. They want Syria down. It's not because they've done anything wrong. It's not because the current Bashar al-Assad has done anything wrong. That's the stories they're telling you. It's all about, in this case, getting a pipeline through that territory. Looks like they may still go to the territory. Is still occupying the entire south and eastern part of Syria, as the president of Syria actually is defeating them with Russia's help. So it looks like there's some quick moving going on here to adjust to that. The point is that there's when you read that, look at that video I suggested to watch. I don't see a mean bone in this guy's body to talk that he has enough error, enough harm that anybody from the outside would have a say to do any of this. So we're lied to. The plans are out there. It's not like we weren't told. The plans are out there. We seem to be, well, I don't know what we seem to be. We're just absent of these things. We get focused on our day-to-days. We don't tie the dots together. I'm trying to tell you the dots are this nose is the notice, and then you need to keep them together. And that was the notice enough to be able to start moving, at least to understand what's going on better, so that we don't get ourselves into the thing that works so well against us is what you call the Hegelian dialectic, where they fabricate a problem that they need a solution for, and they've already got the solution. They get you to buy into it. Isn't this what's going on as we jump now? The information that they tell you wrong, and you go attack something that really isn't supposed to be being attacked, or based on a wrong premise. Moving now from this international expose to the United States warmongering wrong, just complete war criminals. And I told you it doesn't stop. The reflection is there, is here, what they'll do to you in other places as well. This agenda we started out with climate change and the globalization and automation and all these news things they put out, the experts say, and the misinformation we see from at the highest levels, whatever the deepest state might be. It goes on to affect your very life. As I said, that they'll spray you now. They're telling you in a year they're going to have experiments, but they've been doing it all along, but they're going to get you focused on that. Oh, it's coming. And that's not you, those that understand this. I'm talking about you, the mass of people that don't. That you don't, you still believe the government's there to help you, and it couldn't be there when you lost control of it. You were supposed to be vigilant that it didn't lose control. You can't now say that it's going to help you when you don't know, even in the minimum. You cannot give the presumption of innocence to a government where governments are known to be the biggest killers there ever was. The United States is proving it right now. For all the civilians and children and babies they were to save, a number of babies died in the tomahawking of the airbase because they missed. So they don't care about your health. They don't care about feeding you a line to get you to believe that they're working on helping you. That I want to move our ideas onto the other attack. In other words, the aerosol spraying gets you into health, right? We get back to our health. What's the health of your nation but the people? And so this method is after, by any device, is after subverting your strengths. And one of your strengths is your health. And I'll just say, without health, you got nothing. If you don't have your health, you probably have not a whole lot. And the worse that your health is, the more you focus on the worst of it. And that's a descending spiral. Sometimes it comes to you, you're doing the right thing. You take this information from the experts, say it's supposed to help you out. This is for your own good. We're here to save the babies and the children. And then you go and do that to save the babies and the children. And then you're affected adversely, whether you are an ongoing now a caretaker or your little one actually dies. As we move into the health and what they're doing and how fast this can happen, and I bring this up again like the public service announcement notice to us, for those of you that will and take this on, from aspiring pop star to paralyzed in just days, shocking picture of a 12-year-old left bedridden in a hospital after being given controversial HPV vaccine, but doctors want to section her. Again, the system of crime called the medical profession, when they gave doctors licenses, you should have been concerned. That means they commercialized them and put them underneath a centralized control. And this is what James Corbett's discussion I heard on UCY TV was talking about. I think the Rockefellers, I don't get all these names, doesn't matter. You'll find it, research his stuff, where that is the method. They take control, they commercialize something, they then create the ethics standards, and the ethics standards are based on the promotion of their own system. And that system is to promote their exaltation and your destruction, essentially, because they figured out they can. You are a tough critter, and you will take a lot of abuse before you're dead. And when you're dead, they actually make out. Look what the state makes out when you die. If you don't do it right, if you don't give away all your stuff before the end, the state will come in and take at least half. Now, why wouldn't the government give these people license to extend out your suffering until the end? It's all about the bottom line. But controversial HPV vaccine, I don't know where that adjective came from, but if it is a knowing general knowledge that it's controversial, I know people who are into anti-vaccines or are questioning vaccines and see the truth of the harm, they may consider it controversial, but to come out and generally now to say this is controversial, I'd like to know where they got that. That's very interesting. If it is a controversial vaccine, why is anybody taking it? And so this may be noticed to you that they're now disclosing these are in fact harmful, and what I've been telling you is the only defense is to bring these proofs, you bring these notices to you from the news that they're, and tie it together, like I said, with the data sheet of those vaccines and show where the harm is and say, until you can show this is not going to happen, you can't force me to do something that's going to be harmful by whatever statistic you have created. And based on these, again, if you want to get into the harm, the wrong information that experts say about this and give your little ones over to that, I don't know about you. But you want to help yourself and your little ones and get knowledgeable, there's a thing that once you do get involved, you're seeing another proof that there's harm that comes through these. Whether or not you call it autism could be the difference in whether or not you prevail in your remedy, which was critical for me to point out to you that John chose to expose to you regarding this vaccine-damaged children. I want you to remember this vaccine-damaged, they use the word children, but, whatever, your son or daughter, I would say, but vaccine damage is where you want to begin and end. This is a cruel trick that they use as a system. This is supposed to be the United States Court of Claims helping you all to have this problem, admitting now because of when there's a claim that's paid on, that they prove that the vaccines do harm you. And a lot of this has to do with the type, the quality, and the amounts of vaccines you get all at one time and the age. So these all are being talked down, but you need to be understanding it. It sure seems that there's some evidence that some of the vaccines do really cover harms that are greater than if you don't get them. They certainly don't come in 69 before you're 2 years old, or 2 months old. But there are certain ones that come along that you want to research about. I don't want to deny them completely, because the evidence shows that it isn't about the vaccines actually themselves. It's which one, how many, and when to the age. A cruel autism trick played on vaccine-damaged children. This is what I tell people in a way that has kind of struck me a bit, what John highlighted here. Insightful for him to pick it up. It's what I tell the minors all the time. You better learn the law really carefully, very closely, and then stay close and exact upon the law's language. Because and pay attention to what's going on in the world, and stay close to the language, because they can't take the language of the property away from you, and they can't take that property. They can if they get you to buy into a different terminology to describe what you're doing or what has been happening. And so one of my pet problems with I want to say pet peeve, and I don't even know about those. One of the real problems about the minor is a term called dredging. They use it all the time. It was an interesting single word that people thought was innocent enough, but that term is improper. And so if you agree to use the word dredge, you agree to be doing something you're not actually doing, and that's the thing that's underneath a jurisdiction that is regulable. In this case, the term autism-related to vaccines is not recognized in the courts. If you come with that term in your complaint, you will lose. And this is the cruel joke and trick. So you have to learn how to speak more proper. This is just evidence of what I've been telling you. I'm really glad that John Rappaport picks this up. It's very important for you to understand. He goes, I've covered this subject in various ways. Here I'm going to use a question and answer format to highlight vital points. And he goes through these questions and answers. And you go through like John does, and he's explaining the way you see how the thing goes on and how they bring you to a deception. And by that, you get to see what the deception is. So I thought this was very important. The very important point here in a nutshell for the broadcast, I don't have all the time here to go on, is if you try to claim that a harm was done and something that the court will not recognize or has definitely come out to say they won't, you better not use those terms in your complaint for damages. The vaccine damage is probably as close as you want to do to whatever the symptoms are. And he goes into a little bit about that. And again, he highlights this. It's a word game. And if the parent doesn't know about how to play it, she's almost certain to lose. Okay, so I won't read it on. I wanted to read it. Just too much to read. I think you need to read it yourself. You need to take the time it takes to slowly read what he does and what he says. This is highlighting exactly what I've told you over and over, but specific to vaccines. And why, some of the people may think none of this is listenable to and doesn't mean anything. It doesn't relate. Well, how does this relate to anything if I'm not interested in the vaccines, or I've heard that before? You're not listening. You're not hearing what I'm saying. All this way they're doing this word game, not definition game, the word game. The thing they get you to buy into is what the problem is. And the only way you can know the distinction is to know the subject matter better than the criminal who's trying to persuade you away from it. This ties it's a joke in a way. We have scientists and then we have experts, and the experts are the ones that harm you, and the scientists, given that they're real ones and not conservation ones, they might actually give us something. There's these certain distinctions that we can make. They're not a joke. They're not something you can get on your high and mighty horse about definitions either in dictionaries. This is the application of the legal contrary to your remedies, interfering with them, getting you to buy into the concepts they want you to buy in as they destroy you when you use those. I've recited again through the years, deal with we were doing working the river. Supposedly it was a wild and scenic river. Kind of proved right in there. You go to the law, there's 5 exceptions to that. There's no preclusion of working a mine claim, even a prospective one in one of those rivers. Oh, well, yeah, the miner can't any longer block up one of those rivers like they used to, but that's really the only limited thing. There was no restriction to work a claim, even a prospect claim, in a wild and scenic river. Let alone that you're not dredging. And so you get all the law enforcement come down, as I told you before, without getting too deep in the subject matter. They attempted to try and get the words that we were doing to conform with their criminal impositions and regulable commerce authority. I then even knew enough about this problem that I would not allow the cop, in this case it was a sheriff, to reframe and reconstruct what I was doing by his words. I also didn't get so bright and proud and egoistic that I told him how much I knew. I just addressed the core point of why he was doing what he was doing to defeat how he was going to use it against me. Is this word terminology problem that they do everybody in by, or they don't give them the damages they're due by. So, due by. Oh, world class here. John's information here is all important, even if you're not involved with vaccines or interested. This is how they go about focusing you on the wrong thing, and if you don't learn really quickly to look at the enemy you're up against, find the battlefield, and make the list in your mind like I do, to define what the wrong points are and keep them as an absolute untouchable list and find the narrow path that's left, you will not prevail. So, he says don't use autism damage. Do not use that for sure. But vaccine damage is something you'll do. Going to the medical terms for what would happen is better. But vaccine damage as a generality will not let you stand on the landmine trick that they've set up to make you think you can go after a symptom that has no actual proof. And they will not give you damages for on a fictional idea, even though the law is a fiction, if you can wrap your head around all that. Go ahead and buy into that fiction. When it comes down to men and women's rights, or the ones of your offspring, and you go into that legalism, you fail. There's really another lesson here. Well, a Norwegian study links flu vaccine to narcolepsy risk. Now, it's a link to a risk. You certainly won't use autism. I would look in the vaccine court whether or not they have allowed narcolepsy to be a damage. But narcoleptic effects may be in the list of vaccine damage caused by the vaccine, which you might want to state. The point is, we're back to this being very definite about what you're saying. If you walk in, and let's go put it back over to the mining, you said, I dredged in the wild and scenic river, you will be nailed for commercial operating without a permit. And that's not what you were doing, actually, when you realize what the law of the mining law is. Likely here, at the court level, when they will not recognize autism damage, don't walk in and say that the damage you have suffered is autism. In fact, it's a vaccine damage. And so, I said over and over and over, these points are so important. You may get tired of hearing it. Okay, get on to the point. Folks, if y'all were getting on the point, I would too. I'd be on to the next thing that I understood y'all were listening to. We'd be on to the next thing, but nobody seems to really be listening. If they are listening, they're not hearing. And then they're not acting on what they hear about. No, they make a complaint, or they disregard it, or they say, oh, I know. If you know and you're not taking action, you're an accessory. It's that easy and that fast. I don't have to go too much farther than that. So here's a Norwegian study for those of you interested on the information that is starting to come out. We even talk about here, so who did not take the vaccine against the pandemic of 2009 also developed this severe sleeping disorder. What was that? They call it a pandemic imposed upon people, as I've told you. We're talking about the swine flu here, pig fly flu. When pigs fly, it'll be a actual virus that was natural. We found out subsequently it was all DNA managed GMOs, apparently viruses. Remember with the H1s and Ns and all that stuff, all the way up to H7, this 9N9, whatever the heck it is. We found out some people coming out of Asia were bootlegging it out. It was actually made up DNA. The study was shown to increase the incidence of narcolepsy among those who took the vaccine, informs the Institute. Narcolepsy is a neurological disorder which upsets sleep-wake cycles and often characterized by daytime sleepiness and sudden lapses into sleep. It's pretty severe. So here we have, you can keep using those vaccines, or you can bring it up and say, listen, we have a real problem that I'm not going to subject myself or anybody else to, or allow someone to be subjecting it to. If you know this is a problem, and it has any interest in you at all, or you feel that you can do something, you need to step up and do it. And I'm telling you, not many people will defend themselves. In fact, they will do more to harm themselves than not. As we find out, the so-called popular diet ingredient now linked to leukemia and lymphoma in a new landmark study on humans, you animal, you beast of burden animals. So all y'all that were drinking all this stuff, I'd watch people drink this stuff and they'd puff up like a balloon. I go, that's not doing you any good. Oh no, but I'm losing weight. How can you be losing weight when now you're retaining water that weighs 8 pounds a gallon? And it looks like you've taken on about 50 gallons. Why? Because your body is storing water, not only because of the salt imbalance, but also because it's trying to protect its cells from the harm you're doing to it. Why don't you observe these things? Stop drinking that nonsense because you want to lose weight. Get out, change your diet, change your mineralization balance, go out and get some activity. Stop focusing on the negative in the world. Start doing certain things that are taking advantage of the positive and or taking and accomplish things. Most important was, in my finding, was the mineral balance in a woman is really interestingly difficult to gain. And as soon as you can, man, it just like changes the whole world for everybody. These ingredients, and this one in particular, can only interrupt that. If you, as one diet soda daily may increase the risk of leukemia in men and women, and for a multiple myeloma and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in men, according to new results from a longest ever running study on aspartame as a carcinogen in humans, you dirty dog. You beast of burden. Aspartame. We've done these reports for years. Whereas now there's a long-term study. You can read about it again. I can talk and talk and talk. My reference about this diet happened to be with an ex-brother-in-law so long ago I don't even remember the look on what he looked like. But watching him, he had a problem with losing weight. He went on to this Diet Pepsi. He wasn't even with a woman, having to deal with the women's weight problem. This happened to be before I was into doing that. Watching this guy started to go get on his Pepsi because he had trouble with the weight, and he blew up like a balloon. He wouldn't stop drinking that Diet Pepsi. And it had aspartame in it. I said, that stuff's poison. Why don't you listen to reason here? No, gotta do it. Gotta keep going. It tells us diet on the label. I listen to the experts say. And you all do too. And when you don't act against what you hear that's wrong, you are allowing that to be harming someone else. And yes, Frumpy, I'm back at it. I'm on you all, putting the lashings, and all you all just sitting there like frumps on a bog. And thank you for noticing last week, Frumpy, and we had our little chat. I appreciate your acknowledgement of the fact I'm doing what I can do to give everyone the knowledge of what we need to be doing. I appreciate that. So I'm back at the lashings for y'all. There's something out there that can't be right that really bothers you. You need to be stepping up. This health stuff, to me, is probably the most important. I'll just say it again, and you all know it. I'll say it anyway. You don't have your health, you have probably not much at all. If you don't have your health, you have nothing. It becomes a critical point of vulnerability that's attacked at every point. And we're susceptible to promotion. We're susceptible to propaganda. It's ads, subliminal or overt, external or silent. We are creatures subject to this that we have to keep on guard. I'm quiet. I'm just being quiet. I talk a lot. I'm sure that you need time to think. This has got to be the most important problem I can imagine. And once you get it under control, then you can move on. And I'm talking to all you all that have a problem with, not going to be preachy here, but you know this is the problem unless you're beyond it, unless you maybe had your DNA changed. Those of you that have addiction problems, or even if you don't think you have one and can't stop doing something and you know it affects you, you know this is the problem. You know that your health is being interfered with. And it makes you incapacitated to some level. And I'm asking you to consider that. I don't understand why people, once they see that, I know it's difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult to stop an addiction of any sort. But once you notice that's the case, you really have to focus on that and get yourself back into the living. It can't be a good thing to be having this leash around you, this millstone. I just can't. I can't get that. And so we have to fix ourselves. Hopefully there's someone around that can help. And I've been noticing in my life there's lots available that can come to bear once you put your mind on doing something. We're not helpless. We're not made to be helpless, and we got a pretty literally a miraculous, this machine, if we can call it that. This body that we have is really fascination all of its own. That it works, and it can work, and it can be made work better. I mean, I just take this inspiration from my grandfather. And again, I don't have that I know of. I don't have an addictive type attitude or personality, this personage we have, this body. I don't think I have too much of an addiction, more than now I've kind of focused on subject matter I get to get done. That's kind of an obsession now, but it's a purposeful one. It doesn't seem to hurt anybody, except for it steals my life away from other things that I can do, and that's going to be one of the costs. But my grandfather had an addiction to alcohol. And it wasn't until he was about 70 years old he finally figured out how he was going to break it, and he just broke that thing. And I was appreciative to have at least a week of time with him 2 weeks before he died. He didn't die because of his addiction or the results of it. He died by having his truck that he was working on die in the middle of the night, got run over on a highway that someone didn't see him in the road. He was going somewhere and doing something at 75 still. Even after this addiction, he had something to go do once he figured it out. And he took the energy and the time it took to stop the nonsense in his life, and he fixed it. And I was able to watch that in somebody. So I know it's, after all that time in someone's life, it was terrible in his life. He was not a nice guy while he was under, but when he got off of that, watch out, this guy was something to be admired at some level, for like anybody would be. I don't want to get too promotion on a grandfather, because that would be almost natural to y'all. But he was able to break that, and it controlled his life up until that time, and then it didn't control him at all. And I was able to then meet with him again for quite a few days, all at one time, right before he died, so I got to see who he was. And actually wished it was happening, he was there before. The guy that was him, not the alcohol, not his addiction, not his troubles. But it took energy, it took effort, it took persistence, and then he was able to accomplish that. If I saw that, I know we have lots of power in us to solve some problems, and I don't know why we can't do that. These standards that are put on us, these experts say type things, where do they come from? Well, they can be challenged, and they ought to be. Like we find out the psychiatry is just made up stuff. Why autism is not actionable, because it's made up stuff. They're telling you that. I don't know if you got that. Court won't respond to that because it's made up. All this stuff is made up. The more direct statement is vaccine damaged. That vaccine caused damage, not what you think is going on around it that makes you drool on yourself. What's the causative agent? Here they have standards. Those standards, psychiatry or the medicals, all standards that are made by these official boards that are used in commerce to destroy you. And it's been found out they can be challenged. And one of the most recent events that happened that may or may not have gone under your scrutiny is Texas can no longer fabricate its own medical standards to justify executions. So standards can be challenged. The United States Supreme Court on Tuesday, this was months ago or so, concluded the current medical standards must be considered when determining whether a defendant facing the death penalty is intellectually disabled and thus barred from execution under the Eighth Amendment. The ruling was strong rebuke, particularly to the state of Texas, which has had a long based such determinations on outdated science in concert with a set of subjective, if not simply stereotyping, standards that are largely based on a fictional character. I hope all y'all are laughing on that, folks. You should have bust out laughing. Like, what are you reading about that? Of course, right? You say, of course, based on fictional. Well, the whole medical system is based on fictional characters. That little paragraph right there should have been the call to action for all of y'all that are in against vaccines, medical standards, psychiatric labels. The science, the outdated science, has now been co-opted by the people like what the Rockefellers that made the subversion of the medical system. That can be attacked now. Notice is our call to action here. But you can't make a subjective discussion on your standards either. To me, that opened up the whole medical profession and psychiatric profession, but notwithstanding. If you have a state that makes these subjective decisions, they can be challenged. This one had to go all the way to the Supreme Court, so okay, so you got to learn how to do that. Here's the remedy, right? It wasn't a lawsuit, it said stop using, it was an injunction, stop using that standard and use one that's based in science. Well, that's a problem. That's the science-based technocracy upon us, isn't it? And so this is a mixed blessing. So understand that battlefield, and I think this is fuel for a major bonfire, folks. Big time. At some point I'm like encouraged. I wish I had more of me around to be going out after. I might actually feel energetic about going after some of these things if I could actually know that I could accomplish them. But there's so much that's involved. It's so many things that are going on. I've had to focus my energies on a couple things. They happen to be kind of expansive, but they don't encompass medical standards or psychiatric standards or this thing that comes down as so-called science that isn't. The pretext for the imposition of the method that destroys you. Standards, folks, important. So the objective standards, what I've been telling you, go to the law, read the black and white. That's what I talk about. You got to have that black and white before you move anywhere. Even if it's wrong, you need to know then that it is and how. Okay, because the legislature made a law making a moratorium on an activity that's granted by Congress as a property right that required a remedy of injunction. Then we had to understand how the court itself was going to be a problem. We took that out. That remedy was quo warranto. So we have to have standards. These are rules, the principles behind the woodshed. I try to bring to y'all that we need to keep moving forward and use them. We can't be sitting there thinking about it, contemplating our navel on it. And Gary L. brought up one that on his broadcast, The Road Less Traveled, happens 2 hours past this broadcast, that I want to just call your attention. The standards, fake olive oil. Fake olive oil companies revealed, stop buying these brands now. I've been happy after this article. The olive oil that is around behind the woodshed was all pretty good stuff. No adulteration. But the standards are adjusted. You have to read how they do it. Be careful of labels. You have to read the labels, but even the labels are deceptive. Standards are what you're looking to do, the objective basis that's complied with, and what's the remedy when they're not. Not necessarily the state has to come down with a big club all the time. It just needs to make the standards that we're all supposed to live by. A new standard might be coming to help us out. Interesting technology. Heavy man, probably more the inflection. Cornell's hyperbaric 55 pressures pathogens. We don't need chemistry. We can just kill, as I told you I think it was last week with the laser delousing. You need heat. You use light, ultrasonics and laser to heat things and destroy them by heat. 55 pressure pathogens. Pressure kills bugs. Put something underneath that immense pressure, you'll kill everything. You don't need these drugs. The Cornell University has a discussion on this in the Food Safety News website. So we don't have to go to these drugs that they keep giving us. We have other answers, and we have to have them in our face to know, they're available, so we can assert them in other places. Otherwise, they will make the future they want, and they're going to destroy you with it. So, physical world has physical responses and natural responses that we can use that doesn't hurt anybody. And yet, so you have to then question, then why does the government allow legislation that is really a license to harm you? Is a really important question you should not be okay with. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I said something to get you all motivated to do something. There's some wrong that needs to be right. Go do that for us, folks. Help us out a little bit. I'm doing what I can. I know you can do what you can. Thank you, Grimner, for all you do. RealLibertyMedia.com and Blogcaster behind the woodshed, the archive, and FreedomsNetwork.com. I hope we get to use the social network there for getting together to do more active things. UCY.TV and Jules, thank you very much for the simulcast there. And anybody else that's out there that's doing that and hasn't told me, like the terrestrial broadcasters don't like to be named too much for identity reasons, I guess. So thank you for what you do, and I'll be here next week, tech diffs or nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.